Okay. The reason you guys came here, besides you just love MUFON, is we have a special guest with us today. He's an American author. He's published many books, and you'll see him out there. He's topics on all sorts of alternative history and historical revisionism. His works cover such subjects as pre-Columbian transoceanic contact, Atlantis, Lemuria, ancient astronauts, UFOs, Tesla, Knights Templar, lost cities, the Vimanas aircraft. David Hatcher Childress, he's known as a real-life Indiana Jones. He's got many, many books on many captivating topics. You're going to love this man. We've met him, we've talked with him. He's a wonderful person, a great personality. You know him from TV. He's been on Ancient Aliens and a number of other documentaries. So I'm not going to fool around here. Let's welcome David Hatcher Childress.
Well, it's great to be here. My first time here to the Phoenix MUFON, and this is great. I always love coming to these things. I want to tell you a little bit about myself before we get started. I was born in France, but my parents are Americans. My father was in the military in the late 50s. My parents liked to travel. I lived in France for my first 3 years, and then I grew up really in Colorado. My father was from Durango, Colorado. So I grew up as a little kid in Denver and Durango. So I'm very much a four corners kind of guy, I like to think so. And later my parents got divorced. Then I went to high school and university in Missoula, Montana. My parents loved to travel. We would go to Mexico, and we went to Stonehenge, and we would go to France and Europe. We went to Turkey and Greece. I grew up on a steady dose of Johnny Quest cartoons, and Ripley's Believe It or Not, and Man from Uncle, and then the Time Tunnel, and all that kind of stuff. And like you, I'm interested. I've always been interested in history and UFOs and paranormal, Atlantis, ancient aliens, ETs, psychic phenomenon, all that kind of stuff. Growing up in Colorado and Montana, I was very much also a real outdoorsy, camping kind of guy. I became a technical climber, rock climbing and stuff like that. In the 70s, I went to Mount Rainier to learn technical climbing, ropes and ice axes and all that kind of stuff. I had always had a sort of dual interest, wanting to go to Tibet and Mount Everest and the Himalayas and stuff like that. As a young kid out of college and high school, I wanted to go all over the world and have adventures, go to Mount Everest and stuff. I did that. I didn't climb to the top or anything, but I did technical climbing in the Himalayas. I stopped doing that. I was killed in an avalanche. And as I kind of got older, I realized I wasn't bulletproof, and I kind of stopped doing really dangerous things and doing more history and travel. Hitchhiked on yachts. I traveled through Africa. I lived in Sudan. I worked with a catering company to Chevron Oil in Sudan. There were times when I was completely broke. I didn't know how I was going to make it, but I did. And ultimately led me back to the United States, and I kept traveling, and I began writing my books. My first book was a book called A Hitchhiker's Guide to Africa and Arabia, which was a travel adventure book. But later, I got into what my real interests, which are ancient civilizations, extraterrestrials. Ultimately, I got into all this super technology, like Nikola Tesla type stuff. And that's going to be pretty much the presentation today. Those of you who were at the Open Minds Symposium, the presentation I'm going to give right now is pretty much the same one. So if you saw that, you'll see some things again, of course. We'll start with some ancient technology and megalith building, then we'll move into Vimanas and Nikola Tesla and even some extraterrestrial archaeology stuff. That'll probably be after the break. So yeah, fasten your seatbelts, and I guess we'll get the room as dark as we can, and we'll get going. So the whole idea of ancient civilizations, how old is civilization, and megalith building, for a long time they were saying that these ruins on Malta were the oldest megalithic ruins in the world, and the date of those is controversial. Some ruins on Malta have been said to go back well over 10,000 years. Mainstream archaeology is saying to about 7,000 BC or so. These are the giant ruins of Giganteja, which is on Malta. There's evidence on Malta that there were actually all of these pygmy elephants and hippos and things on Malta. It wasn't an island then. It was hit by a giant tidal wave about 10,000 years ago on Malta, and then they were washed into this cave in Malta. I mean, Malta itself went through some big cataclysm. Malta's a tiny island today, just off of Sicily and between Libya. Today, mainstream archaeologists are saying that the oldest... You know what that is? That is my mic. Falling down into my... You know what I'll do is I'll just put it here. Okay. All right. So, I have a pretty loud voice, by the way, so I think you'll be able to. All right, so now mainstream archaeology is saying that the oldest ruins in the world are at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. And they're pushing civilization back to around 9,000 to 10,000 BC. They are megalithic. They're 10 to 20 ton T-shaped megaliths. You'll notice here too, as you look at it, that it's got these animals in relief. I mean, mainstream archaeologists are saying, yeah, this is 10,000 years old, older than Sumeria. This is the kind of date that we're looking for when we think of Atlantis. Atlantis being an Egyptian story given to the Greeks. This is all Göbekli Tepe. This is what it looked like. It was on top of a hill in Turkey. It's right near the Syrian border, by the way. And it was purposely reburied, this whole site. Here's the Göbekli Tepe site here. So now archaeologists, the mainstream, they're saying, okay, these are the oldest ruins in the world. And they're saying it's before civilization. They're saying, oh, there weren't really cities. Why is this one mic just as... Yeah, this is this one mic, Jim, I don't know. It started off or something, I'm not sure. You know that little clip?
Aha. You want to use handheld?
Well, maybe I should.
A little clip.
Yeah, I mean, it's falling down in my shirt.
We don't have this problem when there's only 10 people.
So much for advanced extraterrestrial technology.
Got it. Wait a minute. You know what? It's right here, David.
Oh, okay. Just fill right off this thing.
Can you hear me now?
Okay. Get the rest of it. All right, that's good. All right, so let's keep... What we're going to really look at here is gigantic megalithic building all over the world and how inexplainable it is. The largest quarried stone blocks that are known are at Baalbek in Lebanon. This is right also near the Syrian border. It's in Lebanon. It's a super dangerous area to go to. Tourists can't really go there now. With the war in Syria, it makes it even worse. What you have at Baalbek, and mainstream archaeologists are saying that the Romans built this. And there are some Roman ruins, but they're built on top of this gigantic platform that we're looking at right here. Huge blocks of stone. They weigh like 1,000 tons. The largest known quarried block of stone in the world weighs almost 2,000 tons. It's this one right here. It never made it to the giant wall at Baalbek that these things were stacked up on. These kind of blocks are just so gigantically huge that even modern construction equipment and cranes can't move these giant blocks. Now, mainstream archaeologists have to explain, how they're saying the Romans were able to move these blocks and put them into place. The way they came up with it, and it was a French archaeologist, what his theory was that they built this giant cage around this, gigantically huge granite block. I mean, it's the size of a railway car or something. And by using like hourglass type of notches in the stone that they cut, they could then put in these they call them actually keystones, and you'll hear about that again. So they would have them in this cage, and there would be hundreds of them, and they would build this whole thing with pulleys and all that, and they'd have all these little T-shaped things locked into the stone, and people are pulling ropes and everything, and then they would move this block a few inches and start all over again. Because these blocks of stone are just so gigantically huge that, how are you going to move them? Why even? Why would you even try to do this? And these are the kind of questions, that we're going to look at right now, and this is what mainstream, this stuff they don't want to look at, and they can't answer these things. All right, we'll go now to Abydos in southern Egypt. It also is a gigantic megalithic site. It's apparently pre-Egyptian. It's actually built next to a real dynastic temple, which is called Abydos. This is known as the Osirion. And in fact, it was underwater. The Egyptian government spent decades pumping it out. Now let's look at a few oddball things here. These little knobs and things like that. Look at these notches right here. How the blocks are notched. They're not perfectly in there. They've got these odd little knobs. So we'll be seeing more of that. Now we're at Cuzco in Peru. And this is one of the granite stone walls there. This jigsaw cutting and fitting of blocks. This is the famous 12-sided stone in Cuzco. With all the different corners, the articulation, the perfect fitting of these blocks together. In fact, this stone appears on the beer label of the Cuzqueña beer, which I've had several of over the years. Here's another corner in Cuzco. Again, you're seeing here these little granite blocks. They have these notching, they have these knobs, like we were seeing at the Osirion. Now we'll go to a place in northern Greece. This is the Necromanticon. This was a site also that was buried underground. It was only discovered in the 1960s. It has also this same kind of jigsaw, weird fitting of the blocks of stone. In ancient Greek mythology, this site is affiliated with the river Styx and the underworld and Hades. It's some kind of like super ancient construction. But it's also this perfect jigsaw construction. Now we're back to Cuzco, and we're going to stay in South America here for a little while. This is the fantastic super fortress of Sacsayhuaman, which is above Cuzco. This is what it looks like from the air. It had a bunch of towers. It's these zigzaggy walls. They're also of this jigsaw patterns. They're giant blocks of stone. They're fitted together. The Incas and the Spanish had a battle here at one point, after the conquest, actually, during one of the revolts. Mainstream archaeologists are saying that these walls were built only 100 or 200 years before the Spanish got there by the Incas, who didn't know the wheel, they didn't know writing, but then they were able to put together these giant walls. They are huge. In fact, the Spanish themselves, they dismantled as much of Sacsayhuaman as they could to build really colonial Cuzco, colonial Spanish Cuzco. This is another area of around Sacsayhuaman. oddball stuff that you see there, upside down staircases. It's like people had laser tools and power tools, and they're just cutting into the rock. And again, mainstream archaeologists can't really explain this. They're saying, oh, well, these were the stonemasons. They go there and they're practicing their mason skills. It's bizarre. Just weird stuff that's cut and articulated, and for no what reason, it would seem. You have also, all around Sacsayhuaman, you have these stories, and I detail this in a chapter in my new book about these weird tunnels that went underground. There's a lost treasure that's put in here. It's all so amazing. There's these tunnels right here. You can go through some of them at Sacsayhuaman. They're cut through solid rock. The Peruvian government, in fact, actually had to seal up a bunch of these tunnels around Cusco because people were wandering inside them and not ever coming back. There's a lot of, there's just so many strange stories down there of this weird tunnel system, underground stuff, and of course there's a lot of UFO activity there too. So the mainstream is saying that, okay, these Incas, they didn't really know the wheel, supposedly, but they wanted to build things on this grand scale. They had to, drag giant blocks up and perfectly fit them together too. Machu Picchu is the most popular tourist destination in South America. It's a megalithic city. It's a secret city on top of a mountain. The mainstream archaeologists too, they're saying, oh yeah, it was just built just 100 years or so before the Spanish got there. This massive city. Much of it is megalithic. Walls like this, they're pulling apart. This wall here at Machu Picchu, it's also perfectly fitted blocks and with huge lichen patches and things like that on it. The whole building of that city, it's really incredible. Near to Machu Picchu, on the Urubamba River, is an even more incredible site, and it's called Ollantaytambo. Ollantaytambo is known for this sun temple up here at the top. As you come up, you have these terraces and dinas, they call them in South America. You're coming up here, you walk, then you walk up this trail up here, and then you get into this area right here, which is the Sun Temple area, and we're going to look at that right now. You come up these steps, and then you see these walls like this, and you notice again the sort of oddball knobs here. Archaeologists don't know why they're there. They think it has something to do with the construction, but they can't figure it out. You see, once again, all this little notching and fitting of small blocks or small notches, the big knobs. Articulation here, these are really fine red granite blocks. Once again, the perfect fitting and a jigsaw pattern. I mean, this is the kind of construction that's the most superior in the world because it's not using mortar or anything, and when a shock wave of an earthquake hits these walls, the wall itself is able to move, but the blocks are all interlocked, so it can't shear or pull away. Although parts of some of these walls have fallen and been destroyed in earthquakes or even in what appear to be like horrific wars and things like that. Once you get up to this top Sun Temple area of Ollantaytambo, this is what you see. You see giant blocks of granite just sitting around like this. Blocks like this, just sitting here. Other blocks like this one with small little crummy rubble. See how it's been cut and articulated, these blocks. And it would appear that they were, according to mainstream archaeologists, they're saying, well, they never really finished building this site. Although in some ways it looks like it's been destroyed, like hit by some devastating weapon or missile. This is the main thing that tourists see when they go to Ollantaytambo. They see this one wall that is still put together. They call it the 7 monoliths. Each one of these is weighing probably 80 to 100 tons. And then it's got these very unusual narrow strips of rock between each one. You'll also see the knobs. Archaeologists can't explain that. This is kind of a unique spot in that way. But as you go around the corner from this site, you see more of these giant blocks like this, with also these curious knobs and things. All right, and you see here like a block, and then see how this block is here notched again. But now between these blocks is just this crummy fill. I mean, this is how it looks now. And this is how it looked during the Spanish times, and this is how it looked in Inca times too. So here you go. Here's your ancient alien construction or Atlantean construction or something, and here's your Inca construction. Just, you know, and this is part of the problem, is that when you're going to haul some gigantic 200-ton block up and set it there and then notch it like this, you're not going to just fill it in with this crummy rubble. I mean, you know, another gigantic block is to be perfectly fitted against this. So this is really the problem, is you have two different, obviously different, you know, times and construction periods. One super good, I mean, of just gigantic blocks, and the other of pretty much, you know, kind of crummy, easy construction. Look at here, this kind of articulation of this, these like corners and stuff like that. These sort of inside corners are very, very difficult to do. This is where you need iron tools, you need power tools, huge saws to cut these. And then just the moving of these stones, I mean, that's a whole other thing right there. And I get into all this in my new book, Ancient Technology in Peru and Bolivia. Now you're seeing one of these blocks. This is also at Ollantaytambo. Here we're starting to see these keystone cuts. Now these are these T-shaped cuts that are cut into one side of a block. And there has to be another one on another block. So you're going to have a corresponding block for here. It's also going to have a keystone cut. And then you're going to pour molten metal into these clamps. Now these blocks are so gigantically huge, you wouldn't think that they would be going anywhere, really. But yeah, they wanted this additional support and construction fastening technique with these clamps. But now here's another problem with that. If you look at these clamps here, this is on the other, also one of the walls at Ollantaytambo, kind of a crummy one, but this is a huge stone block. But here's one of these keystone clamps. This is one side. But this is on a vertical wall. I mean, this is a block of stone that's not where it should be. It actually can't be here. Those clamps have to be on a horizontal face because molten metal has to be poured into it, and it's got to have a corresponding block there too. So this is a block that was cut, made with a keystone cut, but was never put into its place, wherever that was meant to be. It's somewhere else. As you go up to the quarry, the Ollantaytambo fortress is over here. We're going up on a mountain. Here's the Urubamba River up here. You look back at the town of Ollantaytambo, and you see this pyramid in the fields. And it's like the town itself was designed to have this kind of false pyramid built into it. It takes about a day to get up onto this mountain, which is the quarry above Ollantaytambo. And what happens is you get up there to this cliff face. We've had to ride horses and stuff to get up here at times. I've been up here like 3 times. What happens is that there's all of this scree around this one side of the mountain of granite. And what it looks like is as if the mountain was blasted out with like some weapon or something, and then all these giant blocks came down. And then they start to square them right there. And so they would take the biggest boulders they could and square them off. And in fact, this is one that is still there at the quarry. And you can see the saw marks. It's as if, and we'll get to Puma Punku here in a little bit, it's as if some giant quarrying machine came down with giant saws and just began slicing this granite like it was bread. Also up there is this stone wheel, which is enigmatic. It also appears to be sliced. It's like something from the Flintstones or something. And I mean, it's this giant, you know, that's probably about a 2-ton stone wheel that's there, and it's even got a hub and stuff. They can't really explain that. I mean, their best explanation actually is that some Spanish guy came up there and made this and then just left it there. I mean, and this is the thing, they're all over the world, particularly in South America. There's just stuff, and the archaeologists can't explain it. And what their best thing is just to not talk about it if they can. Let's just ignore this stuff, you know. All right, let's go back to Cuzco. And in Cuzco is the famous sun temple. It was called the Coricancha in Quechua, the language of the Incas, and the warrior there. And this was where this gold sun disk was. There were supposedly these gold-clad mummies of the Inca emperors. And what is also there, and in fact, it wasn't known until really just a few decades ago, because this structure, which became a Spanish church and a monastery, was destroyed in an earthquake. in 1950. And then over years and years, I mean decades, they uncovered parts of the ancient walls. And what they found inside was really strange. These strange little niches that are articulated, they have drilled holes in them. It's like some machinery or something like that was in there with cables, all this like articulation. And in fact, they've even put plexiglass doors over this right now. And it's only been like a decade or so that you could really see this. And it's bizarre. So it's this really fine articulation, and they can't really explain it. The mainstream is that, oh, they tied up some tapestry like on a statue or something there. All right, we'll move south to Lake Titicaca, and we're heading for Bolivia right now. And this is a place along the west shore of Lake Titicaca called Cotimbo. And Cotimbo is a strange archaeological site. It's not much visited actually by people, but on our trips we go there. And it's on top of a mesa, very much a lot like the mesas and things that are up in northern Arizona and New Mexico and stuff. As you go up on Cotimbo, as you start climbing up, there's a strange spot where it's like power tools and polishing has just taken part of the cliff, and for no real reason. It's like they just have these tools and they just do this. And they've polished, they've cut this area here. This is rough stone. This is where it's been cut and then smooth and polished. Like they've got some power tool and they're doing this, and for no real reason. I mean, you just can't see why they would even do this. As you get up to the top of Cotimbo, there are these weird towers, and they have no idea what they're for. They're megalithic, they're perfectly fitted together. Most of them are round, a few are square. They now, like Göbekli Tepe that we saw, they have, like animals, snakes and lizards and things, are cut in relief. And they're actually in relief. In other words, and these things are hard to make because you have to cut the whole stone out to make this snake. And that's mainly what is there, these pictures of snakes and serpents. Here you see more up here. It's all very strange, these things. The mainstream trying to explain it says, oh, well, these are burial towers. And they would just kind of put dead people in there for a while and come and get them later. Again, this was one of the towers here. See, this is like a mountain lion or something carved into it. Also two mountain lion faces there. There's some more. There's like a snake over here. This little door. It's possible, in my book on ancient technology in Peru and Bolivia, I'm speculating throughout that book, that a lot of the stuff here has to do with ancient mining and metallurgy, the search for gold, all kinds of metals and things like that. You need forges, you need, and that's part of the thing, is where are these molten metals? Where are the mines? Where are the foundries and the smelters for refining all these metals? More of these, just to show you, this is back in Cusco. This is a wall that's in Cusco, has these same serpents cut into the stones. And I was saying the Incas did this like 200 years before the Spanish got there. But at Cotimbo and other sites, they're saying, oh yeah, that's much older. That's 2,000 years old or whatever. So the dating of all this, it gets really screwy. Some of it's really old. Some of it's actually pretty new. This is what mainstream is going about. And in fact, it turns out that these serpents cut into walls and stuff is, of all things, goes back to the Kurds and the Yezdis, who are related to ancient Sumeria, and they're in northern Iraq today. So this is the area of Mosul and Tikrit and stuff like that, where the Kurds are in the very northern part of Iraq. And this ancient religion, they're called the Yezdis, and they're not Muslims. It's a much older religion, but in their temples, and there still some exist, only in northern Iraq, they have these snakes, like what we're seeing in Peru, carved into them. So that's an oddball thing, and so now we have something of a relationship between ancient Iraq and Sumeria with Peru and Lake Titicaca and ultimately with Tiwanaku. So as you keep moving along the west shore of Lake Titicaca, you'll come to this famous Stargate, the Devil's Door it's called, the door of Amaru Muru. It's carved into a solid rock, like kind of escarpment. It's actually kind of a narrow thing, and it comes up here. And then the door is carved into it. People claim they have a strange, some people, strange, things happen to them and meditate. You hear different stories. I've been there a number of times, and it is a weird place. And it's like other stuff. Just exactly, why is this thing again? Is it really some gate? It's like a false door. And it's like other things were put up against it, and there was some other structure there that's not there anymore. It's been torn apart or something like that. And in fact, false doors were used in Egypt and stuff. This one is in Giza. This is near the pyramids and stuff. This is an Egyptian false door, just a door going nowhere and stuff. So, okay, we'll go to an area of Bolivia, and then we're gonna come back to Tiwanaku here in a little bit. This is another oddball spot in Bolivia, going towards Brazil, and it's a place that's on top of a mountain. It's called Samaipata, and it's carved onto this top of a mountain. It's a solid rock. It's got these weird channels. Eric von Daniken, in one of his early books, he did go here, and he speculated it was some rocket launching thing or something. It's got these weird rivulets coming down. There's also a weird tunnel here that you can go into, and that I did spend some time. It's also like things were there that aren't there anymore, like the structures were torn apart or washed away in a giant tidal wave or something, and only the things that are just bare, carved into solid rock are still there. This guy here lived in this same area, and he was like a Swiss Bolivian. He owned an auto parts place in one of the big cities, and he was building a summer home. And in his well, he's dug up all of these things, a bunch of almost like gutter things, and they were like 50 feet underground. And he started bringing up all these things, and they're almost like kind of sandstone drainage pipes or something that were part of something. He doesn't know what. All right, so now we're back on Lake Titicaca. This is it, the highest navigable lake in the world. It's nearly at 13,000 feet in the Andes. About half of it is in Peru, and the other half is in Bolivia. There are underwater structures at Lake Titicaca. There's a lot of UFO activity. People see UFOs coming in and out of the lake, they claim. There's stories of underwater cities. There is a seahorse that lives in Lake Titicaca, which is very strange. Seahorses are oceanic critters that live in Indonesia and stuff like that. Why seahorses would be in a lake at nearly 30,000 feet in the Andes is unexplainable, really. People like James Churchward, who wrote the famous book, The Lost Continent of Mu, he theorized, and other people like Laplanchion, and that the idea is that Tiwanaku thing was all part of a giant canal. Part of the Amazon was a sea then, was an ocean, and that there was almost like a sort of ancient Panama Canal type thing that ran from the Pacific into this Amazonian Sea. This was their concepts, and it would have and then all of South America would have been much lower at the time, and some pole shift or something sent it to this high altitude. I've always been interested in theories like that, and I'm certainly accepting of that. Whether that would have happened during the time of the building of Tiwanaku and stuff, it seems like that would have happened so many millions of years ago. All right, here we go. This is the famous Gate of the Sun at Tiwanaku. And this guy is allegedly the sun god, the Nachuri is. They sometimes call him Viracocha and stuff. He's holding these golden rods. He has the sort of feathered headdress and things like that. He's also crying, and tears are coming down from his eyes. Oops, something wrong with that one. But let me show you also here. If you see on this side, this whole thing, this gate, it's all part, it wasn't really to be standing where it is. It's part of some other building. And in fact, we're not really sure who erected this, but it's all part of this gigantic wall that's perfectly fitted together. And there's also, at Tiwanaku, there's a big pyramid. This is a, they weren't allowing photos of this at the time, but I snuck a photo. There are these strange tunnels and things like that through Tiwanaku that we're looking at. Like that city was built to have channels running through it. It was some kind of a canal, water city. There's just a sunken temple. This guy is the famous Kon-Tiki statue of Kon-Tiki, and then the Tiki whole concept is a Pacific island thing of tikis from Tahiti, New Zealand, and stuff like that. And in fact, I mean, Thor Heyerdahl, the Norwegian archaeologist, was very fascinated by this, and one of his books is about it. This guy has a beard and a mustache. American Indians don't have beards and mustaches. He's holding his hands in what they call a tiki position. One hand over the heart and one over the stomach. This is the tiki thing, and that's what he's doing. If you go to Tahiti and New Zealand, other Pacific Islands, you'll buy little tiki medallions exactly like that to wear, and that's what the tiki does. But he's always got a hand over his heart and one over his stomach. So that, I mean, this really kind of relates things to Pacific Islands and things like that. At Tiwanaku, too, was this pyramid called the Akapana Pyramid, and it had this lake, this cross, with an Andean cross lake at the top. So actually they had to have like what you call a ram pump, and it's some kind of hydraulic works that was forcing water uphill into this lake and reservoir. And that reservoir then would be used, I maintain, to wash the ores. The Tiwanaku was a giant mining complex, and it was all for washing ores, metallurgical stuff, purifying metals, and you need water and all kinds. You need towers, you need charcoal, you need heat. So here's a quick map of the Andean area. Here's Lake Titicaca. Tiwanaku's right down here at this southern area. There's some evidence to show that Lake Titicaca, which is now a freshwater lake that has seahorses in it, that the seawater drained into this lake down here called Lake Popo, and that lake is a saltwater lake, like Great Salt Lake or something like that. But Lake Titicaca today is a freshwater lake, but was originally saltwater, and over thousands or millions of years, it transitioned to become a freshwater lake. Here's a satellite photo of Lake Titicaca and stuff like that. So Tiwanaku is like down around here. Kutimbo and whatnot, the towers are in this area. This is the really deep part of the lake right here. And this whole side here on the eastern side is very remote. Tourists and people don't go over there. There's a border crossing here, but you can't cross it. It's like a real smuggler's area. I'm told it's actually dangerous to go into this area. Now, Lake Titicaca is actually two different lakes, and this is what they call the greater lake up here, and it's deeper. And then they call this the lesser lake. Now, they think that there is a sunken city down in this area, and this is also an area where a lot of UFO activity comes, and there's a lot of UFO activity in the greater lake as well. This is the kind of reed boats and things that are on the lake. In fact, Thor Heyerdahl took some of the reed boat builders back to Morocco and Egypt to build these reed boats that he was going to take across the Atlantic. This is a guy too, Ramiro Gonzalez. He's a Bolivian artist, and he wrote an interesting book about Lake Titicaca being the Garden of Eden and all that. He had an interesting idea of how it was all these canal cities, what Lake Titicaca and that was a much bigger area, and that canals would come into this massive city complex. He believed that South America, if you look over here, was this kind of thin, long continent that was more closer to sea level, sort of like New Zealand or something like that. This is before some pole shift that changed all the geography and sent the Andes, thousands of feet up higher. So here's Puma Punku. This is taken about 10 years ago, actually. I first went there in 1985. And what is at Puma Punku is like giant blocks of granite and sandstone, weighing again 100 tons, 200 tons. Blocks at Baalbek are 1,000 tons. And and again, what you're seeing are now the keystone cuts. Remember, we were looking at those at Ollantaytambo. And now at Ollantaytambo, they were saying, oh, this is the Incas doing this. But now we're at Puma Punku, and they're saying, oh yeah, this is all pre-Inca. This is all from, sometime, there's so many different datings for Puma Punku and Tiwanaku, and then some people say they're two different sites and from two different times and stuff like that. That was more the Ancient Aliens view during the show. Here you can see some of these H blocks. We'll see more of that. At Puma Punku especially, it's like some gigantic building was there, and then it was just tossed around like some kid's building blocks and destroyed, like some cataclysm type thing. It's this kind of articulation of the blocks, this really fine cutting and articulation, little corners going in. And these are the kind of things, it's these inside corners and things that are so hard to make without really precision tools. You can't just bash these out with some stone hammer in your hands or a copper chisel. You need hard stone tools, and ultimately, as we would maintain to do this, you need power tools. Huge saws, even kind of laser cutters and things like that. So at Puma Punku, you've got these huge slabs, you've got giant stone blocks lying around. Some are sandstone, some are granite. You've got, in some cases, huge, huge keystone cuts going into these blocks. And you really wonder, like, why they would even need these things to hold blocks away. The metal in these things is basically gone. Anybody who is wandering there, this is Ancient Aliens here doing some filming. These are some of the H stone blocks, and we're measuring them, the precision. Some of the keystone cuts and things like that that go into it. Some of the clamps that were poured into these keystone cuts must have been huge. I mean, 5 to 10 pounds of metal poured into it. So, and this is the other thing with the mainstream archaeologists. Where's this metal coming from? I mean, they have to be pouring, molten metal into these, the keystone cuts. Here's more of them, more keystone cuts on blocks. Here we are. This is Chris Dunn, a friend of mine. He's a British-American engineer. He's also been on Ancient Aliens. And right here, we're looking at these like small drill holes. So here's a place where this block has been cut. Then a saw, like a power saw, went through this and cut it. And then all of these tiny drill holes. I mean, they would have had to have a power drill to do this. I mean, this is what we're looking at. And part of it, with Chris and with Brian Forster, myself and others, Giorgio even, and Eric Madonna, we're looking at the precision. And with Chris, he runs a machine shop in Danville, Illinois. I mean, they do special aircraft machinery and stuff. And so, I mean, he's looking at this stuff, and what he's looking for is evidence of precision machining and a tolerance that just can't be done by visually even. I mean, only some power tool and cutting things. And even he's got things like these little rollers that show you how flat and level something is. It's pretty interesting. These drill marks. Once again, you're seeing like these little saw cuts and stuff like that. I mean, this is the kind of thing that you can't do this unless you have you have to have electricity, you have to have a power tool. You'd have to have what we have today, and that's like diamond, tip saws and things like that. And also at Puma Punku, and it's funny, today after the Ancient Alien show, because I was there in February, they've actually blocked off parts of Puma Punku and stuff, and they've taken stuff off of display. And didn't turn your phone off, did you? Get you with my laser. He's my friend. All right, so you're there at Puma Punku, and this is your typical trenching that archaeologists do. You get your trench coming down, and then here are these blocks of stone, and these are more of the keystone cuts. Okay, and this is how they would have to be. There always has to be another stone on each side of a keystone cut, and the keystones aren't there. So look, blocks of stone are like this. I mean, they're just sitting there on a 3 foot pile of mud and muck, having been, wiped out. I mean, it's like some tidal wave from Lake Titicaca or something came and just wiped this building out, destroyed it, covered with mud and muck, and only today are archaeologists, uncovering it. And I once, when I was there, I was talking to a University of California archaeologist, this woman who was, very mainstream, and I asked her about this stuff. And she said, oh, well, the Spanish just pulled this down, and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, what? How do you explain this? Well, so anyway, other things too, like this old photo, giant, huge statues at Tiwanaku. And these bug-eyed guys, they're wearing this almost like fish skin and stuff like that. I mean, it's all bizarre. This is a strange thing too. This is at Tiwanaku. There's about a kilometer or half a mile between Puma Punku and Tiwanaku. But this was really strange because it's part of a gate, and this is some kind of granite, but it's like it had been chipped, and part of the main part of the gate had been chipped off and knocked off, and they have some kind of super concrete that they filled it in with. It's just like rock, like what we would use today. And this is something done in ancient times. I mean, it's some kind of repair work that they did on this stone, but with some liquid stone. I mean, and a kind of a concrete that we don't even really know about today. And concrete itself, I mean, it's what we do so much. So much of Phoenix is basically poured stone, liquid stone that's now, giant concrete buildings. But this same stuff too. So. Yeah, I mean, this was pretty interesting, but not only are these guys using power tools, and they're cutting giant stone blocks, and the quarry, by the way, for these stones is quite a ways away. It's like 20 miles. And then they're using this special kind of concrete or something to patch these things up. Now, this is right in the same area. This is the kind of thing, too, and you'll see this in Egypt. This is the kind of thing that's almost impossible to do without power tools, where you have a radius coming down, and it's coming right here, and then this is all curved, and it's curved in, and you have this like corner here where a straight face, yes, but then this other face is curving in. It's like a CAD program and like a lathe kind of thing is cutting into the rock and making this curve, and it's all uniform. This is the kind of thing that you cannot bash out with a rock in your hand. And that's what they're saying they did. And this is what Egyptologists say about Egypt stuff. Zahiwas. It's like, yeah, they went out there with a round ball in their hand and they just bashed out these things. I mean, pretty good, isn't it? You're like, what the heck? So look, you can see how this is, now we're back at Puma Punku again, and it's just about a block away. These are these gates. They're monolithic gates. And the Gate of the Sun is like this too. They're one piece of granite, but they've got a door cut in them. They're articulated. I mean, they actually make little door jambs. I mean, they get fancy because they can do it, and it's not hard for them. They're actually playing around. They're so good at what they do, and what they're doing is apparently not so hard. What's also interesting is these drill holes at the bottom. You can see them here. I mean, yeah, so they have the drill holes. I mean, they have like, little, something, the stone things that they fitted it all in. I mean, we don't know. These guys got fancy. These kind of blocks here too, these T-shaped things. I mean, the more you look at it, and what's good about Puma Punku is that because so much of it was buried, and it's only being, uncovered right now. It's like pristine. It's not really heavily weathered. People haven't come and bashed it and tried to, move it. The Spanish were trying to break up the stones into smaller ones so that they could move them because they couldn't move the really giant blocks. All right, now, so this whole idea of these monolithic doors, this is actually in Persepolis today in Iran. And this is what they call Xerxes' Palace. It's from, like, supposedly 1000 BC or so. And about the same time as King Solomon and whatnot. And yeah, these are monolithic doors too. They're cut out of one solid piece of rock, and they have a similar kind of articulated door jambs, like what you see at Tiwanaku and Puma Punku. So kind of similar construction. You're also going to find keystone cuts and stuff. This is what one of these monolithic doors, would look like as a diagram. I mean, this is fancy stuff. Even they would need like computer-aided programs to cut this stuff out. All right, this is from the museum there at Tiwanaku. This is what one of the clamps would look like, and that's a real clamp, So, and in fact, what happens is you're some wandering tribe, this would be any place in the world, and you come across this giant, ruined city, and then, hey, there are these like little metal clamps there, and what do you're going to pry them up and hammer it into a spearhead or a dagger or something, and that's what happens to them. They're removed. They're too valuable to really leave there. All right, now, just to show you how this thing, now we'll go back to Egypt. This is at Karnak, and here's the keystone cuts right there too. Same type ones, hourglass ones. This one is like an axe head, but you always have to have the 2 blocks of stone, and then molten metal is poured in here. This is at the Edfu, also in Egypt, and these are keystone cuts on a wall, and this is like what I was showing you at Ollantaytambo. And but again, these are blocks of stone that are where they're not supposed to be. Keystone cuts, but this is on a vertical wall. Some, like here, you see keystone cuts together, and these 2 blocks might have been, but this is all from something else. I mean, the Egyptians themselves took something apart, and then they put it on the wall. But it's all vertical, and there's no metal clamps put in there. And in fact, there's keystone cuts. I mean, there's whatever's going on here. This is something just built out of rubble from some other site, and none of these blocks of stone are meant to be where they are. All right, now we'll go actually to Vietnam, to a place right near Da Nang. This is right along the border of what was North and South Vietnam. It's where a lot of the fighting was, actually. And this is a megalithic site called My Son. And My Son was supposedly built by the Cam people. And the Cam was where we get the word Cambodia. And, by the way, Cam is the ancient word for Egypt. Okay? The Egyptians called themselves the Cam. And they called their country Cam. Even today in Arabic, Egypt is Kamet. Okay, that's the Arabic word for Egypt. They don't say Egypt. They said Kamet or Kemet, Cam. So the ancient word of Egypt is Cam. But these guys are the Cam, but they're in Southeast Asia. And here's more keystone cuts, just like at Puma Punku and Tiwanaku for that matter. I mean, this is an unusual way of fitting megalithic blocks together, and that people would come up, independently of this by themselves in remote places all over the world is, kind of far-fetched. Here's more stuff at Cam, My Son, Cam areas there. These guys, their capital was this island off Vietnam, also called Cam. But these are megalithic granite blocks. And in fact, when I was here in My Son, this was like 8 years ago or something, and I showed our guide all these keystone cuts. I mean, because it's what I'm always looking for. And he'd never even noticed them before. And he's like, "Whoa, I never, well, what are these?" And I explained it to him. He was the guide. He was the tour guide. And it was all some revelation to him that that these things are there. I was like, okay. This is also what My Son looks like today. It's a tourist spot, but not a well-known one, really. And it is. Here we go. And this is the Da Nang. There's a cool museum here too. My Son is actually up a river up in here. But their main capital was this area, was this island right off of Vietnam called Cam. And the Cam guys there, it's like they were sort of this cross between Egyptians and Hindus, Hindu Buddhists and stuff. And a lot of their iconography, a lot of the guys look African too there, although this is Southeast Asia. It's kind of like the Olmecs and stuff. Here's a guy, this is also from Cam. This is supposedly Shiva, and he's got the third eye in his forehead there, kind of thing. So this would be Hindu iconography, Buddhist. This guy is also a cam figure. He looks very Mayan. You can almost, if you were to show that to somebody and say, oh yeah, this is in Mexico or something, they would say, oh yeah, right. No, it's Vietnam, in fact. This guy's also a cam guy. He's got the beard, the mustache, the big earlobes and stuff like that. These are also cam, sort of Hindu Buddhist woman. She also looks a little bit African. Angkor Wat in Cambodia. Angkor Wat started out as also Hindu temples and stuff, then they were recarved as Buddhist temples later, and these are the faces of Buddha. Angkor Wat's a really cool place out in the jungle, and it's probably much older, again, than mainstream archaeologists say, just like the Inca cities, the supposed Inca cities in Peru and stuff. And there are the keystone cuts there too. And in fact, the Japanese archaeologists began doing the excavations, and yeah, they found the keystone clamps and cuts. Also at Angkor Wat are monolithic doors and stuff like that. That cut out of a door, cut out of solid piece of rock. So when you get into the Pacific and going through Indonesia, you're going to go into all kinds of weird megalithic sites and stuff like that. This is the rebuilding of some megalith in Sumatra, actually. And this is a rare photo because there's just not really photos anymore of people trying and to move giant blocks of stone around. And here they're doing it. But what are they going to do with this? They're going to sort of like move it down the street and then maybe flip it up on its side or something like that if they can. As you go into an area of a remote Indonesian island called Sulawesi, and in the middle of this island, and there's only been a road there in the last 10 years, there's this place called Bada Valley. And as you go into Bada Valley, even today it's hard to get there. I was just there last summer, and there was an Ancient Aliens episode there. There's Bada Valley. Are all these weird statues. So here's Sulawesi, Java, and Jakarta and stuff are down here. Borneo's kind of over here. So Bada Valley is this strange valley in the middle of the island, and it's also where some of the earliest proto-rice is found. And this is what Bada Valley looks like. It's high up in the mountains in the middle of the island. The people who live there are today Christians because even though most of Indonesia is a Muslim country, they never got into this remote area. And so the people weren't Muslims there, and then it wasn't until Dutch missionaries got there, and so these guys are all Christians. But what's there are all these weird statues. They guess that they're from 4000 BC. I mean, they have no idea how old they are. This is what they think. They seem to also be carved with power tools and stuff. They're strange-looking guys. They look kind of like aliens. They look like Easter Island statues a little bit. Again, why they're there, who built them, they just don't know. They're just sitting out in these rice paddies and stuff like that. Some of them are, they're gigantically huge. This guy's got an erection and everything, and he's got his hands going like that, which is sort of what the Easter Island statues do too. We'll see that a little bit. But it's also this is really fine stonework and really well made. And this is again, it's like what they did was they took granite boulders from this river that's there, the biggest ones they could get, and then they just carved them up with their power tools or something. And what they also, you find there are these weird stone jars where they've also taken granite boulders and things, and they've turned them into like a big cauldron or something. And they weigh a couple of tons or something. But to make things like this, again, it's baffling. Why they're making this, how, what their purpose was. Some of them are broken like this. It would seem to be that, again, power tools are being used. It's like some airship just landed in the valley. And by the way, it's a gold area. And so this valley is rich in gold. So there's this, like some ancient gold mine. They have these power tools. They just made these statues, for the heck of it. They made these stone jars and stuff. We'll take a break in just a couple of minutes here. I'm going to run you back. All right, now we're back in Peru and Bolivia. This supposedly what Puma Punku looked like. The idea as what architects, as they looked at the ruins and the stones, they tried to reconstruct what these H blocks are like, and that's part of the thing with these H blocks. They're like Lego blocks or something that are, megalithic. And they're all carved and articulated, they're almost all the same, they're like building blocks that are like fit together. It's like some processing plant is just spewing out these blocks, they're all more or less uniform, and then they could just assemble them into these weird walls and stuff like that. So what Puma Punku looked like and what it was like is fantastic. I mean, what these structures, how they really looked. It's pretty incredible. So here you go at the museum at Tiwanaku. They're like, well, yeah, they had to pour molten metal. So here are the logo guys. I mean, they got a cotton tunic on. They're sort of primitive guys, but they're building this, fantastic buildings. And yeah, they have to pour molten metals into these little, these keystone cuts. So once again, it's this sort of mainstream saying like, well, these guys are primitive, but they did some pretty amazing stuff. So yeah, here's what one of these H blocks really looks like, how it's cut. I mean, it's just amazing articulation. I mean, this is really, why you would even cut a block, to look like this, particularly if you're just bashing out stone, that's tough. Right near Tiwanaku, and this is something that's just come out in the last few years, there is this mountain that's nearby, and you can see it from there in this village, and it's a pyramid. And what they found there is this thing called the Potiki monolith. Basically, the villagers who live by this pyramid, and it's not an official thing. I mean, this is not an official archaeological site yet. They're kind of digging into this pyramid and looting it. And what they found is these statues. This statue has Sumerian writing on it. Okay, here's some of the Sumerian writing. This is all in my book on ancient technology in Peru and Bolivia. Here's some of the Sumerian writing. Now, there's different kinds of Sumerian writing. There's cuneiform, and then there's proto-cuneiform hieroglyphs. The Sumerians also wrote in a hieroglyphic script. Now, at the Precious Metals Museum in La Paz, this is an official government museum, is this bowl. And it also came from the area of Tiwanaku. It was in a private collection, and then it was acquired by the government of Bolivia. And what's strange, they call it the Fuente Magna bowl. This bowl has two types of Sumerian writing on it. It has Sumerian hieroglyphs, and then it has also Sumerian cuneiform. And it is Sumerian writing. There's no question about it. And it's in a government museum in La Paz. Now, this is the guy, Maximiliano. The government traded him a house, kind of a small little adobe type house or something, for the bowl. That's what they did. And here's the whole thing with Sumerian, writing and hieroglyphs. This is one of these artifacts that just can't be. Mainstream archaeology cannot ever admit that this is real. This is a time bomb to modern archaeology. There cannot be a Sumerian bowl in Bolivia. There just can't be one. The Sumerians can't have ever gone there. And this is something, they cannot address this. They can't. If they did, they would have to maintain it with some forgery or fake somehow. But this is in, the Bolivian government museum. Bolivia is a little bit of a renegade country, as we know, and that's a good thing in this case because they do what they want. I firmly believe that this bowl had been found in Peru, it wouldn't be in a museum there. And this gets into this stuff like Smithsonian, where unusual things are found, whether it's giants or giant bones or Egyptian things in the Grand Canyon or whatever. They can briefly be in the newspaper or somebody reports it, but soon it disappears. and it's not in the museum anymore to see, and even photos vanish. And it's kind of like, we're going to take a break right now, about halfway through my presentation. But I often like things like this to the last scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, where Indiana Jones he's got the Ark of the Covenant and all that, and it's the very end of the movie, and he says to the guys in Washington, he says, well, where's the Ark now? I want to see this. And they tell him, oh, don't worry, top men are working on it. Well, who? Well, top men. And then the last scene of the movie is they're putting the Ark of the Covenant into this big warehouse and all these crates, and no one's ever going to see it. That's the end of, the Raiders of the Lost Ark. And what I've discovered over time in my archaeological research is that, yes, stuff like this, that happens. It really does. So I think this is a good time to take a break, right? And then we'll continue afterwards. Thank you. All right.
That was good.
Stand back here.
Radioactive water.
Yeah, I wondered.
That's what we thought about that house.
So I think I'm starting to talk a little bit about hieroglyphic languages and stuff like that. All right, so they always tell you in Hollywood that, any good documentary, first you tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. So, yeah, what we're going to see now, we're going to see some cone heads and weird heads, some Olmecs and stuff, and then we'll get into Vimanas a little bit, and then Tesla, and a few things. So back to Tiwanaku. This is what some of these guys look like. He is a kind of Andean Aymara type guy. They also think, by the way, that the Aymara language, which is spoken mainly around the southern part of Lake Titicaca, is a Sumerian language. And Sumerian, by the way, too, which I'm not some expert on it at all, but from what I understand, Sumerian is not related to any other language, which is unusual. But it may well be related to Aymara. So this is a guy, notice how he has a cheek plug. I mean, this guy's got, body piercing and stuff like that. His face, he's wearing a turban. And this is one of the guys from Tiwanaku. These guys are from Tiwanaku too. The guy here at the top, he's got a big beard and a mustache. I mean, he looks like he's from the Mediterranean or something. The guy there at the bottom, he looks like he's some Chinese guy or something, and he probably is. So you got all these different guys at Tiwanaku. Now, this is the museum at Tiwanaku. And yeah, you've got your cone heads and stuff like that. As a matter of fact, when I was here in February at this site, I go there every year or two, this display of these skulls, and some of them are cone heads, has been removed from the museum. You cannot see this now. And in fact, it's all papered up, yeah. And exactly why they would have removed, or stop people from seeing this. Even when it was on display, you weren't supposed to take photos. So anyway, we're going to see more of these, but this was on display at Tiwanaku, some of the cone heads. Now, one of the main areas of the cranial deformation and stuff is really around Nazca and Ica and a place called Pisco and Paracas, right around here. This is the desert area south of Lima. And in fact, really, Tiwanaku is like sort of just inland, directly east of this area. You go there too, around Nazca and Ica and stuff, you're going to see some pretty amazing skulls, like this guy on the far right. But here we go. Here's some of your skulls that you're looking at. So these guys, mainly from the desert area of Peru. And that area, this is the Atacama Desert. It's one of the driest deserts in the world, so skeletal material and stuff like that is very well preserved. A lot of these guys were mummified and buried in a place called Chongos. But some of these skulls are really, really extreme. And, I mean, they look like extraterrestrials. This is what they call cranial deformation. About a year ago, a book of mine came out with Brian Forster, a Canadian who lives in Peru. This is the pyramid of Chongos, and this is where a lot of these skulls and things were found. These elongated heads. Some of them have almost twice the cranial capacity that we have. We know that there are ways that you can take children and deform their skulls. And people absolutely did this, and it was all over the world. We'll see some pictures. This is also from Paracas and stuff. This skull is really an unusual one, and this may well actually be an extraterrestrial. When you have plates in your head, and when you're a small child, and the plates in your skull haven't fused and stuff yet, but you have like 3 main plates there. But this guy doesn't have that. He has like only one plate coming here. He doesn't. A normal skull would have like a fusion of the skull here. So this is a kind of a child. They would do this to infants, but this is the big question. Were there people who actually looked like this? Throughout Peru, this is a guy with a more normal skull, but he's been trepanned. Trepanning is where they cut a hole in your skull and stuff like that. And he had a gold plate, put in his skull, and he survived it and lived for years. And his skeletal skull material grew around the gold plate, and everything was cool. You have mummies and stuff with red hair there in Peru, and that's unusual. And there's a lot of different stories in my Lost Cities books too. I talk about the enigma of red-haired people and stuff around the world. This is also in that same area. This is called the Candlestick of the Andes. It's a giant geoglyph that's dug into this hillside, and it can be seen from the oceans, seafarers coming in, and also from the air, and it sort of points kind of inland. Let's see, more of these. I'm going the wrong way. There we go. All right, here we go. So, just a little bit farther south of this area is Nazca, the famous Nazca Plain, where all these geoglyphs are there, hummingbirds, even a spaceman, monkeys, and there's all these trapezoidal lines, things that look like airstrips. Some of these lines go for hundreds of miles towards Tiwanaku, into the Andes. This is all kind of in a desert coastal area. And of course the thing with Nazca is it's really only seen from the air. And it does seem to be, and it's a bunch of stuff overlaid on it. It does seem like kind of a giant airport, glyphs to the sky gods and things. I mean, it's a fascinating and totally weird place, and I think there's no single answer to it. The Olmecs in Mexico also did the cranial deformation and had these elongated heads. The areas of Mexico, though, which is along the Gulf Coast, are jungle, acidic soil, and so we don't have that much skeletal material from the Olmecs. But this is what they also look like. And as a matter of fact, these guys have also been removed. These were at a museum in Mexico at Comacalco. And Comacalco's, it's near to Palenque. The main town there is Villahermosa. And this is the oil area of Mexico. And these are the Olmecs. And I've been going to Comacalco for years, and I was also just there in November. And yeah, they had removed all these displays of those weirdo Olmecs because it's almost like they look too much like ancient aliens and stuff. This skull here, he's more of a pumpkin head skull, the one on the bottom. Smashed head skull. This is where they widen the skull. This is at Merida in the Yucatan. So he's also some weird cranial deformation kind of guy. I mean, we know that there are ways to do this to young children, and you start by deforming and binding their head, kind of like Chinese foot binding and stuff like that. So the Olmecs themselves, I mean, all this stuff lately of the end of the Mayan calendar and all this Mayan stuff, but really almost everything that the Mayans did and came up and are credited to the Mayans are really come from the Olmecs, the mysterious Olmecs. And the Olmecs weren't really known until 1940. They just were an unknown civilization. And then in 1940, they gathered people from all over Mexico, all over the world, to Mexico City, where they unveiled this whole new culture called the Olmecs. And the Olmecs are often known for what are called these colossal heads. They're like 20-ton basalt heads and other bodies and stuff like that. Some are in Guatemala. Olmec things have been found as far south as Costa Rica and Panama and stuff. This is in, these are in Guatemala along the Pacific side. The Olmecs were on both the Pacific coasts and the Atlantic coast. Some of the Olmec statues, the colossal ones weighing 20 tons, are really, really well carved. They seem to be a kind of a combination of Orientals and Africans. And in fact, they have a real similarity with the Cam in Cambodia and Vietnam that we were talking about before. Things like this statue, I mean, he was buried, and people were walking over it. They started to notice, like, his nose and stuff like that, and they unburied him. It's like these things were purposely buried, either in some cataclysm or something like that. I mean, and these are basalt. Basalt's extremely difficult stone. It's one of the hardest stones, difficult to cut and articulate. Once again, it seems like, you know, whoever are making these things, they're using power tools to make this stuff. And literally, I mean, oil companies in Mexico, you know, using bulldozers and stuff, would just bulldoze these giant heads out of the jungle, swamps and stuff. At La Venta, which is, they believe was the capital city of the Olmecs and stuff, they had really sophisticated drainage systems and hydraulic works. There's pyramid and stuff there. I mean, they were very sophisticated. So the whole thing with the Olmecs is that their main territory is sort of, it's here on this Atlantic coast, but it's also here on this Pacific area too, and up the coast, and it was down here. So, and this is what they call the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. It's the narrowest part of Mexico. And in fact, before they built the Panama Canal, they had two other places. So there were three places where they were trying to span the Pacific and Atlantic, and this was one of them. And they, in fact, the Mexican government, what they did was build a railroad, basically, you know, across this area. The other site was to be in Nicaragua, and then finally Panama is where they finally did it. This is also an Olmec basalt guy at the Olmec Museum in Jalapa, Mexico. And he looks very Egyptian, and he's wearing like a false beard, like the Egyptians and stuff would wear. Very, very unusual statue, and very Egyptian-like. This guy's an Olmec too, slightly, you know, and what we have a lot from the Olmecs is mainly statues and stuff. He's holding a rubber ball. They're the ones who really originated the ball game and the rubber balls. And by the way, the ball courts are up as far as northern Arizona and in southern Utah. There are ball courts. This is an unusual statue too, colossal head of the Olmecs, and there's this weird pock marks. And here, we'll just look at that, these oddball pock marks. Archaeologists were baffled by this and still are. It's like someone, after this statue was made, they went in to try and deface it. And it's like they're taking a power tool, some kind of grinder or something, and they're dishing out all these little scoop marks in this basalt. I mean, it's bizarre. And again, they can't explain this. Why and how someone would do this. So again, it's like, yeah, that somebody with a power tool is going like, yeah, I'm just going to deface this statue, and started doing it. This is also at the Olmec Park in Villahermosa, and it's like, yeah, again, somebody, this is the back of a statue of a stele, but again, it's like somebody has this power tool, and it just runs it into the stone, back and forth. And then for no real explanation, except apparently to deface it. This was also at Comacalco, which was an Olmec and later a Mayan city, and it's right on the coast. In fact, there was all kinds of weird writing and stuff there. I write about this in my Lost Cities of North Central America. But they removed this from Comacalco too, because it's showing all of these bizarre, weird statues and Olmec guys, like this guy here looking very Chinese, this guy up here. I mean, these guys are weirdos. Yeah. This one over here. I mean, you think like, well, who are these Olmecs? They're like Americans today. They're from all over the world. I mean, and they're literally every race. And then they have all kinds of facial tattooing and piercing and stuff like that. These are what are called jade celts. These are jade. These are Olmecs. They were found at La Venta. They call this La Venta offering such and such. Now, on the back of these jade, they're called celts or an adze. It's like a tool, like a plane or something for a wood tool. But on one of these adzes, there is early writing on a script. And a special Chinese, a specialist in an ancient proto-Chinese writing came from Beijing and looked at it, and he declared it was Shang Chinese writing. So now here we have in Bolivia, we've got Sumerian writing in the Fuente Magna and the Titicaca monolith, and now we have Chinese writing on Olmec things. All right, now we're going to go to Egypt briefly because we're still looking at some of the cranial deformation. This is one of the daughters of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, Meritaten. They had several daughters, Meketaten, Meritaten, and they also have these elongated heads. And Akhenaten had that, and so did Nefertiti. Nefertiti was not really an Egyptian. She was actually from a place called Mitanni, which was near Turkey in Göbekli Tepe. Tutankhamun. This is Tutankhamun. This is a statue that was from his tomb. Tutankhamun's a cone head too. And you hardly ever hear about that. And he's in the news constantly. But yeah, and they're x-raying his mummy and all that. But yeah, he's got an elongated skull. When we wrote that book, Brian and I, one of the things we found out that kind of amazed us was that no one had ever written any book about this elongated heads and cranial deformation. All right, so these are some Ubaid statues. These are Anunnaki from Sumeria. These are some of the statues that they found. They're from 4,000 to 5,000 BC. This is what they look like. They have also these elongated heads and what archaeologists call coffee bean eyes. All right, and so they have the weird eyes, and of course they have the elongated heads, like we were saying. And we were just noticing before how the Fuente Magna bowl today at the Museum of La Paz, this has got like Sumerian writing. But the whole thing of this cranial deformation is weird. I mean, people were absolutely doing it, and they were some kind of elite. They were always, this is a Chinese guy, he's some like Taoist immortal. Boy, he's got a cone head. These guys are some Chinese Taoist immortals too, you know, they're pumpkin heads with these. And the Olmecs had this too, with this weird split in their cranium kind of thing. And that's a bizarre one. I mean, those are some of the weirdest heads. This is a Chinook Indian from up around Seattle. And I went to, I went to high school and college in Missoula, Montana. Right north of Missoula is Flathead Lake. Flathead Lake is the largest freshwater lake west of the Mississippi, and it's called Flathead Lake because the Flathead Indians live there. And why they were called the Flathead Indians? Because they had elongated heads, and they were these cone heads too. So, I mean, this was going on right up until, even up to today. Okay, these guys are in Africa. They're this tribe in the Congo. These are photos taken in the 20s. This kid is, he's going to be a conehead. And this is what happens. You bind the head when they're still infants and stuff like that, and you force the skull to grow in this elongated, weird way. And people were doing this all over the world. And they did it on remote islands and things like that, and we don't know why. Whether this made them more psychic, whether they wanted to look like the extraterrestrial overlords, you know, that were, whatever. But we know for sure some people just wanted to look like this. All right, now we're gonna go real briefly into the giant weird stone balls, and this is in Costa Rica. They know that these granite balls are man-made. They're very precise. I've been told by engineers and things that to actually make a pretty much perfectly round stone ball is very, very difficult without special programming and things. You need a kind of computer-controlled lathe and thing to make round balls. And the whole thing in Costa Rica, we know these are man-made. There's no question about it. But why they're there, what their purpose was, most of the stone balls in Costa Rica are coming from this southwest corner right near Panama. And there's also like an island here. We've also got these stone balls, and they're like washed up into the jungle mountains. They seem to have no real purpose. I mean, archaeologists are baffled by this. They just can't come up with any real reason. If you go to the museum in San Jose, they show you some burials with some stone balls in it, like the chiefs. You know, they wanted a stone ball in their burial chamber for some reason. I mean, that's like all they can come up with. Now, get this. In Los Angeles, back in like 1908, they were building the Santa Monica Tramway, all right? And there it was going through, and these electric trams can only go up a certain grade so that they they had to level out hills and stuff. So they took this steam shovel, and this is all in Santa Monica. They're digging out this hill, and what did they find? All these stone balls. And I mean, they didn't know what they were. And at the time, they called them dinosaur eggs. And they were like, yeah, well, we dug up this hill in Santa Monica, found all these dinosaur eggs, and we don't know what happened to these things. They're in people's gardens and things and stuff like that. In the Franz Josef land, in the Russian Arctic. I mean, this is remote kind of place. There are stone balls up there. Now, you know, the more I looked into this whole stone ball thing, I was like, man, this is weird. And the thing is that some of them, they're absolutely man-made. But others, like these, well, you know, these are supposedly natural. But exactly how, you know, stone balls are made in nature, we're trying to figure this out, some kind of volcanic bomb or something. In Bosnia, went there a year and a half ago to look at these Bosnian pyramids and stuff, and it was interesting that there's all these stone balls in Bosnia, and they're in these like creeks and stuff like that. We went on a side trip, and yeah, I mean, they're there. And again, we did, you know, there's no real good explanation. They seem to be man-made. They're just kind of buried and stuff. Some would seem to be natural. Like this is a place in Mexico called Piedra. These are supposedly natural somehow from like some volcanic ejecta, and somehow while these molten magmas flying through the air, it becomes a round ball droplet and then cools and it's a round ball. I mean, it's weird. And so in the last few years, I've really gotten into this round balls and trying to figure it all out. It's baffling to me. In Italy, I found there's a bunch of places with also big stone balls around San Augusta and Italy. These are also in Italy. They're like placed around kind of castles and stuff. I mean, some of them are really big. The ones in Costa Rica, like Franz Josef, I mean, they're almost as big as like a Volkswagen or something like that. This is Dubrovnik in Croatia, and yeah, there was all these stone balls there. And now these actually may be cannonballs or catapult balls, some kind of siege thing. And they're small enough that they, might be actually used for that kind of thing. So, and even in China, there's this place, Gongxi, Hunan, China. I found this on the internet. This town, it's got all these stone balls, and people come and look at them, take pictures, and then go home, like this. This is in China. These stone balls. Again, people, they don't know. They think they're man-made. They don't know. Maybe they're natural. Malta, back in Malta, they've got all these stone balls in Malta, too. What their purpose was. You almost wonder if some of these stone balls, the smaller one, were somehow used in the moving megaliths somehow, giant stone ball bearings or something. I mean, we don't know. And archaeologists have no really good idea about it. This is a stone ball on Easter Island in the museum. And then in the museum there, I was just there, they have no explanation for it. They call it, some, mystery ball. They don't know why it would be there. This ball is about the size of a softball or something, but there's a much bigger one on Easter Island too, and it's a special place on the north side of the island. And according to the Easter Islanders, this is the most important thing on the whole island. This ball. And it's one stone ball, and they have it in a special enclosure and stuff like that. And they call it the center of the world, and the navel of the world. It's that stone ball. And it's man-made, again. And what it's doing there, why it's there. And the Easter Islanders don't know either. They're just like, yeah, this ball's important. So, now, okay, next couple of minutes we're going to be on Easter Island. Oh, by the way, somebody asked me to talk about the metal that was in those clamps. It's bronze. It's an alloy. Most metals like that are alloys. Alloys are typically stronger, so you're mixing tin and copper, creating basically some type of bronze. Silver would be used sometimes too, usually mixing metals of different sorts. All right, so Easter Island. This is the crater of Rano Raraku. This is where the statues are all made. We're going to get closer. It's a volcano crater in the middle, and these are the statues. Let's head up there. As you get up there, you find these giant statue heads. They're sitting there in the ground. They're kind of leaning over. They're up to their chins. They're just they're there in this this detritus. So here's Easter Island, really quick. Easter Island is basically a triangular island and on 3 volcanoes, and then Arano Rocco's right over here. This is really where they quarried the statues, but then they placed some of the statues, only some, were actually moved from here, and they were placed all around the edge of the island, looking inward. And the whole idea, according to the Easter Islanders, was to keep the island from going under the water. And it was to save the island, and this energy called mana came out of their eyes, this is what they say, and kept the island from sinking, ultimately. This is a very well-known, story on Easter Island. But those are the statues that are placed around the edge. These ones never made it to the edge of the island. They're still there by the quarry, and they're all buried. Some are leaning over. You can see they're up to their chins. As you go up these stairs into the crater, then you look down, and there's a crater lake there. And what's around this crater lake is Tortora reeds, reeds. Now, these are the same reeds that are at Lake Titicaca. This is what they build the reed ships with. One of the things with reed ships, they're unsinkable. Even when they break up, all the pieces will still keep floating. They have a very shallow draft, too. They can go over coral reefs and things, so they're very good just as shipping. And just like today, we have aircraft, we have airports and all that, but we still have giant ships, and we travel by air and by ship, and I believe they did in ancient times, too. So here we are. Here's part of the Tortora reed in the lake over here, but there's more statues and things over here. Some of them are gigantically huge. They're sitting there inside the crater, all looking down. It's kind of like a natural amphitheater. It's all very strange. It's like people would be standing down here with all these statues looking at them, going like, "Okay, tell us your story," or whatever. The statues are gigantically huge, many of them. They're massive. Some are in this quizuo position like this. This is an unusual one where he's on his knees. We'll get into that. But other statues, this is how big these statues are. Okay, they're huge. Now, and this is from Torhayardal. This has been recently in the news. Yeah, these things are buried. They're 2/3 of these statues is underground, and either they were purposely buried like this, or else thousands of years and some kind of cataclysm and detritus and tidal wave and mud and muck have just washed up on this island and buried them. That's how long they've been sitting there. But again, mainstream archaeologists are saying, "Oh, these things aren't that old. They're just a few hundred years old." They're made. It's like they're made just 100 years before Easter Island was even discovered. Which was like 1722. They're not, these things aren't thousands of years old. No, they're a few hundred years old. But they're so heavily buried. You're like, well, how is that? And that's what people didn't really understand. If you look over here, too, you'll see what is an ankh. That's a Egyptian ankh, the kind of cross and a thing. But it's like also a thing on their, it's like something they're wearing. This was in the museum. Now, I was talking about this power that the statues around the island had these inlaid eyes put in them, and this power, according to the islanders, this power came out of the statues. They were alive. They had this energy, and this energy was then going to save the island, keep it from sinking. This is also at the museum in Easter Island. This is unusual. This is a woman statue, unique and bizarre, with its long head. This is one strange statue. And recently, this is only a new thing there, they found this other statue there in 1960, and it looks, like some kind of alien. Here it is right now. But this is also a unique and weird statue that's there on Easter Island, and it's only been recently put on display, actually. Also, on Easter Island is this famous wall. And it's called Vinapu, and it's one of several, but it's really the best. And it's just like in South America, with this perfect construction and even little notching and small little mini blocks put in like that. This is really a finely made wall, just like in Peru, with heavy lichen patches and stuff on it. And in fact, the name of it is Vinapu, which is kind of similar to the Sanskrit word Vimana. So you can see again that the fine stone construction, it's kind of pulling apart and stuff. And there's this unusual statue, which was actually dug up by Thor Heyerdahl the mid-50s. And he's unusual. He's in this what they call quizuo position. He's on his knees with his hands on his thighs, and he's leaning forward. And it's an unusual position. This is quizuo. So you're there on you're on your knees. You got your hands on your thighs, just like this guy, and you're leaning forward a little bit. So it's an unusual posture for statues, but we find it again all over the world. This is Shang Chinese. 1700 BC. This is an Egyptian statue. This is about the same time. He's in a quizuo position on his knees, like that. This is another Shang Chinese statue. He's in the quizuo position. He's got like a mohawk haircut kind of guy, and a lot of Olmec statues have this too. At Tiwanaku, there were also statues in this quizuo position. These are from Tiwanaku. They're wearing turbans and stuff like that. They have their hands on their knees. This is this unusual position. And I get into this a lot in my Olmec book out there. It's a kind of a sublimation. It's like you're in front of the king, and you put your head out, and the king can either knight you or cut your head off. So here's the other quizuo. This is an Olmec statue. He's in a quizuo position. He has also the top knot kind of thing on his hair, which is unusual. The Easter Island statues have that. This is at Mohenjo-Daro, which is, today that's in Pakistan, it's in India. He's in the quizuo position too. So the quizuo position is an unusual one, and it's found all over the world. South America, Easter Island, all over the place. The Easter Islanders too had this weird writing called Rongo Rongo, and it's a kind of a hieroglyphic writing. Mainstream archaeologists say, oh yeah, these islanders just trapped on this little island and didn't have anything else to do, so they made all these statues and then invented their own writing, you know. Keeps you busy, anyway. And and the thing was, it was this a Czech guy and a Hungarian sort of simultaneously. They looked at the Indus writing script from basically Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa and stuff like that. Compared to Easter Island, they found it was more or less the same script. Both these scripts are undeciphered. I mean, it's like, you know, we know they're saying something, but we have no idea what. The Rongo writing too, like on these tablets, they would write on the tablet, and it's what they call the Bousophidan pattern of writing, or as the ox plows. So that, and Doric Greek was written like this. Hittite was also written this way. You write, one line is left to right, and the next line is right to left, and then left to right. So you're going like that. It's an unusual way of reading and writing, but certain scripts were done that way, including Easter Island writing. This is Hittite hieroglyphs, and it was also written that same way, left to right, right to left, right to left. Oh, am I going the right way? Okay. So, also in Indonesia, Candi Suka, this is a Mayan-type pyramid that's in the middle of Java. I mean, if you were to show a picture of this to somebody, I mean, you'd almost think you were in Mexico or something, but this is Indonesia. The whole thing of the Polynesian Triangle, where which is centered around Tahiti and Hawaii. Here's Easter Island and stuff here. Hawaii. Easter Island is one of the most remote islands in the world, and so is Hawaii, by the way. And so you're coming over here, we'll see a few things. And the whole idea of Vimanas. Okay, the ancient books of India, the epics, the Mahabharata is the most famous one, and there are sub-books of the Mahabharata. And when you read the Mahabharata, it's like the wildest science fiction. People are jumping into their airships, they're roaring off through the skies. This is actually a mural at the Bangkok airport of a Vimana. The most famous story using Vimanas is called the Ramayana, and it's the story of Rama and Sita. We'll get into that in a minute. So the whole idea, too, of ancient technology, just like today, I mean, to really have power tools and the type of technology that you need hard metals and you need electricity. And basically, ancients had that. We know they had certain batteries and things like that. We have things like the Antikythera device, which was found in a Greek shipwreck. It actually has a date on it. It was built in Rhodes. Scientists never believed that ancient people had anything like this. All of these cog wheels, it was more complicated than any kind of Swiss clock. They actually, in the 50s, it was discovered in like 1912, and today it's in the Athens Museum. But it wasn't until the 50s that Americans really started studying the Antikythera device, and they were mind-blowing. They thought, man, we never imagined they had anything like this in ancient times. fact, they said, oh yeah, it's like finding a jet plane in the tomb of King Tut. Now, this is what Scientific American said, you know, in 1950. Well, and then later, now that they started finding all this stuff in Egypt, this is at Dendera, you see here, and in fact, there's a number of depictions of this. I use this one just because it's the clearest. You see these cables are coming out of the back. They go to this box. You have like the serpents. We were kind of thinking that the serpent path is like serpent inside of a light bulb or something. I mean, it really appears to be some kind of electric device, and the idea that they could electrify it. And even you would go into like Egyptian temples or something, and they would be lit by electric lights and stuff. But, you know, and that would be like magic to you. I mean, you didn't have electric lights in your house, and then you go into these beautiful temples, they're all lit. Now, once again, mainstream archaeologists, they have to explain this, because it's totally real. And so, here's their explanation. What's depicted here is a lotus flower. All right? And this is the flower, this is the stem of the lotus, and this is the aroma of the flower. That's the mainstream Egyptological explanation of this. Because it can be an electrical device. Okay, so what could it be? All right, it's a flower that's with a nice smell. There you go. All right, so then you have also at Abydos, you have these things where you've seen this, maybe the famous helicopter here, and this thing like the submarine. There's this jet over here, other things. Now, some of these things like this is actually an arm. I mean, and what? Now, again, the mainstream archaeologists, this is real. How to explain this? There's like, and their explanation is that, well, they made one hieroglyph over another, so it's two hieroglyphs superimposed, and that creates, you know, like a helicopter or something. And you know, there's something to that kind of, but this glyph right here, this jet plane, I've asked them when I was there with the Egyptologists, and they had no explanation for that one. They said, boy, we don't know what that is. That's no hieroglyphic glyph we know. So, I mean, there's the whole idea of having airships. Now the whole idea, too, of heavy equipment, bulldozers. I mean, it's what's created America today, Caterpillar and John Deere and big earth-moving machines. So this is a real thing. This is from Panama. This is what's called a zoomorphic pendant, and it's made of gold, and it has this stone here, and it's got these things in the back. I mean, this thing's about 4 inches long, and it's made of gold. This is a point where, because I'm talking about metals and stuff here, all gold of ancient times still exists today. Gold is indestructible. Other metals rust, they oxidize, they go away, and bulldozers are going to do that. We can't make bulldozers out of gold. I mean, it's too soft a metal, but gold is indestructible. All gold still exists that's ever existed from ancient times, but it's really the only metal like that. So the whole idea with this is that it's a zoomorphic glyph, and what Ivan T. Sanderson thought, he looked at it, it's got a skid plate and stuff like that in front, and what he concluded in the end was that this was really a depiction of a backhoe. Some heavy machinery that's been turned into a monster. And I mean, this is jewelry, really. And so it's got the blades and everything. This is a giant digging machine, you know, but it's a monster, actually, too, some dragon or something. And if it was some diesel thing, yeah, it breathed fire, too, maybe. So the gold airplanes, these are the ones in Colombia that are at the Gold Museum in Colombia. They're totally real, too. There's a whole bunch of these. Again, mainstream archaeologists have to have an explanation for this because it's totally real. Their explanation is that they're depictions of flying fish and bees and things. But fish don't have tails like this, and that's part of the thing with the aircraft. This whole thing, I mean, it looks a lot like a Delta, you know, like a Saab jet or something. They would even put them in formation there to see. So it's just at the Gold Museum, and these things are thousands of years old. So maybe, you know, these the Vimanas, the airships. This was a glider model found in a tomb in Saqqara in Egypt. And we have all kinds of depictions of people. Monasteries, this is from the Dasani Monastery in Croatia. Yeah, this guy's, you know, in some kind of a craft flying through the air. And lots of, it's a common, you know, legend and myth all over the world, from China, of people who've got flying machines. They fly, certain races of people are flying. The Kebra Nagast, which is an Ethiopian text about King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, and they have a son together, and he would fly, supposedly, according to that ancient text, from Jerusalem to Ethiopia to visit his son. And well, she's got her radio right here, right? This is from a cartoon actually that appeared in a British newspaper back in like the 40s, but it was a comment of the Kemper Note gas, and it was like, yeah, this book's saying that he flew around. This is some Assyrian, Sumerian type cylinder seals, and here you got your guys, they're in their flying shield, their flying saucer thing, right? Are up there. When you read the Ramayana, Mahabharata, Dronaparva, which is part of it and all that, they talk about these horrific wars. These guys are in these airships, they're flying around, they're blasting each other, they're just wiping out entire cities. I mean, it's devastating, according to these things. And archaeologists thought, this is all just, massive fantasy, from these ancient Sanskrit writers and stuff. I mean, it just couldn't be, what was going on. Until it was right after World War II, British and Pakistani and Indian archaeologists started excavating in Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Kokdiji, some of the cities are underwater too. It has this weird script that's like Easter Island. This is an extinct type of bull. It's like a proto-Brahma bull, with this animal's extinct now. But when they got to the street level at Mohenjo-daro, people were just lying dead in the street, just like the ancient Indian epics. They had said that this doom, wiped out these cities, and that's what they found. People, and these are cities out in the desert, the Thar Desert, which is really today the border of India and Pakistan. And people were just lying dead in the streets. And some doom had taken over the city. Everyone was dead, and then the desert came in and covered it up, and then thousands of years later, this is what they found. There are reports that some of these skeletons were radioactive too. That was from a Russian book that came out in the 60s. The whole idea of Krishna and Garuda, these guys in the ancient India, they're flying around. I mean, they've got airships, they've got Vimanas. The story of the Ramayana is basically a story of Rama. His wife is kidnapped or runs away with some other guy. Officially, she's kidnapped. She's in Ayodhya, northern India. This guy, Ravana, takes Sita, supposedly down to Sri Lanka, down here in his Vimana. Rama, who's this king up in northern India, he's bummed out for a while. He's like, yeah, my wife left me, and supposedly she's kidnapped. And he goes and meditates in the forest for years. And then finally he says, I'm going to go get that woman. And he jumps into his Vimana, roars off through the skies, goes down to Sri Lanka and all that. And there's a little more complicated story. Rescues his wife, brings her back home, and, everything's okay. Although she also has to, she's not pure anymore, so she has to go meditate for a couple of years. And eventually they get it together again, But that's the whole story. And every Hindu and Buddhist knows this story. Let me tell you. I mean, a billion of them. And it's all about airships and Vimanas. They would depict the Vimanas as basically, these flying chariots pulled by birds and things like that. Well, also, just recently with NASA satellite photographs, see, this they call Rama's Bridge. And this is Sri Lanka down here. This is the very southern tip of India. And what they discovered was, right in here, this is actually underwater. There is this, man-made road. It's like the road out to Key West or something like that. And it's underwater, okay? And even today, ships have to, there's only certain, it's very shallow, just this area right here, and ships have to really watch it going through here. And so here we go, these views. Yeah, this is some kind of man-made extension, and it was part of, and it's all part of the Brahma story and stuff like that. When you read the Mahabharata, these Indian epics, they talk about Vimanas and things like that, but they're not going to say, they don't, and it's like a modern novel. The hero suddenly goes to the airport, gets on a plane, flies to London or something like that, and a novelist isn't going to suddenly say, oh, this is what an airplane is. It's got wings, it's got this and that, there's so many seats. He knows what an airplane is, and that's how the ancient Indian texts are. They talk about Vimanas, but they just assume you know what a Vimana is. But then in 1928, they found this book in the Royal Baroda Library, the Vimanika Shastra, by this Sastri guy. And it's a whole book about Vimanas. And it's allegedly, they attribute it to this 4th century BC guy named Bharadwaja the Wise. He's using other ancient texts. It's a weird book, but it's all about Vimanas, how they work, different types. Later they drew pictures of it and stuff in the 20s, just trying to, I mean, you know, it was the dawn of our own era of flight, but the Vimana texts and other texts too seem to talk about Mercury as part of the thing, that it had electricity. Some Vimanas were round, disc-shaped things. Others were cigar-shaped, Zeppelin-type craft and whatnot. Others had wings, and they were more like airplanes. And you know, they're just trying to draw some pictures from the text. I mean, it's all confusing, I think. The whole idea of Mercury as being part. Mercury was the messenger god. He flew through the air. Mercury is unusual. Mercury is a metal. It's a liquid. It's a conductor. You can do a lot of things with Mercury. Mercury is poisonous too. The caduceus, which is also associated with Mercury, and today the medical profession, seems to show a kind of DNA or vortex, this idea of what you call a Mercury vortex engine. You can do things with Mercury that you can't do with other things. You can put Mercury into a gyro, and you can create what they call Mercury gyros, and you electrify them, and they become, it's like a liquid gyro, but then it's electrified, and you need Mercury to do that. The whole idea of Ezekiel, this was the NASA scientist Blumfield who drew this from Ezekiel's wheels within wheels from the Bible. It, in theory, would also be a kind of a Vimana. A very strange book was written in the 1800s, and it was originally written in like 1880 or something. A book called A Dweller on Two Planets by Philos the Tibetan. It was a strange book. You can still get it today. It was written by this American. It's a bizarre book. It's kind of a reincarnation story. It goes into Atlantis. It's the first book that talked about Mount Shasta as some kind of mystery mountain that's hollowed out, and there's like UFOs and stuff in it. And in that book, he talked about Obelisks. Obelisks, he said, in Atlantis, and there were these ships. They were also submarines. But I mean, it's the 1880s. They were talking about this. Right around that same time, they had the big airship mystery going across America. It's kind of started in California and then moved across the country, where people were seeing all these airships and stuff. Before they really supposedly were airships, they often had these powerful lights and stuff on them, searchlights, and they were like electric. This is kind of an unusual photo too. This is supposedly one of the earliest UFO photographs taken in New Hampshire, also from 1871. And it's some kind of cigar-shaped, kind of weird craft. So this is an unusual photo that I would throw in. It's so old. And now we'll get into Nikola Tesla, probably the greatest inventor who ever lived, and yet he's a suppressed person. Most people don't know about him. Nikola Tesla, he was an immigrant first he was coming from Serbia. He was a Serbo-Croatian. He moved to London first, and then he moved to New York, and he worked with Edison. And Tesla, he was friends with Mark Twain and all kinds of famous people. Tesla, what he invented, and he did it through visions in the sky, was what we call today three-phase current, alternating current. It's what's lighting this building and the whole world today is his inventions. And what AC electricity is what creates it is rotating magnetic fields. So rotating magnetic fields are what create the alternating current that really lights the world today, and it's just so incredibly useful. Tesla would talk about all kinds of things, death rays, anti-gravity. I mean, everything for Tesla was electric. I mean, the idea of firing, rockets to the moon, that's not how he would have gone to the moon. He was a terrible businessman. Guglielmo Marconi was one of his students and then used a lot of his inventions. One of the big differences between Marconi and Tesla was that Tesla was a man out of time. He was a total social misfit. He was a terrible businessman. He never got married or anything. I mean, he was a very odd person, and couldn't really function in normal society. Just a super duper geek. Marconi was different. Marconi was a smart guy and a good businessman, and he could actually manage money in companies, and he did all kinds of amazing things. The more you find out about Marconi, it's interesting. So part of that, too, has to do with Einstein's unified field. Here's Einstein on his car they used to drive around in. Didn't do that. The whole idea, too, of what they call plasma physics, and it's this whole thing of these electrified gases that are in a vortex thing. A plasma is an electrified gas, like a neon or something. And these are from a book called Gravitational Manipulation of Dome Craft, which we are the publishers of it. I didn't bring any today. It's by a British guy, but he gets into all this technology, which would be that. This too, the T. Townsend Brown and this whole toroidal coils, this had to do with these antennas and things like that. And this is anti-gravity research that was taking place. This was in the 50s, really. But it was all based on Tesla stuff. And Philadelphia experiment is all part of this as well. And I'm just going to run here pretty quick. So the whole idea, too, that using Tesla technology, using Tesla stuff, I mean, the American government and others, they're fascinated by this. They have to be working on all these things. Going to the moon now, briefly. I mean, there's weird stuff on the moon. I mean, I believe that there are structures on the moon. This is the Hypatia Ryle. This is drawn by a British astronomer. I mean, there are places on the moon that are kind of like Monument Valley and stuff. Just weird stone things. There are pyramid formations in certain craters on the moon, like this Aristelis right here, this one on the top, where you've got these, like pyramid complexes, dome cities. Back in the 70s, there was a couple of books written about it. Secrets of Our Spaceship Moon by Don Wilson, where he got into, saying, yeah, there's all these pyramids and weird stuff on the moon. A guy named George Leonard wrote this book, Somebody Else is on the Moon. This one had a photograph section of it. He went on about, too, these things rolling and moving around on the moon. This is real. And this one, too, even Apollo 17 astronauts took pictures of it. I mean, they're basically saying these are just rocks rolling around on the moon. And one of them actually rolls up out of a crater and then down the other side, What's going on? The whole idea that they would have underground cities and bases on the moon that they're going to try and put in. And in fact, according to George Leonard, there's this crater on the moon that they can't find a bottom of, and it's supposedly going into this hollow moon kind of thing. Tesla had these death rays and things, also similar to Travis Walton, like the tractor beams and stuff, that these rays could come in, they could disintegrate things. This is all stuff from the 1920s, too. And Tesla wanted to build these towers. He was going to build these Tesla towers, and he was going to broadcast power, like a radio or TV station. And the whole thing with Tesla stuff was that electricity would literally be broadcast, and instead of plugging a lamp or some electrical device into a wall socket, you would just set it anywhere on a table and turn it on, and it would come on. This was what he was trying to do in the 1920s, that he was going to build these towers and these airships. And these airships are like anti-gravity. They're taking power from these towers. Magazines and newspapers in the 1920s talked about this a lot. And they would interview Tesla, and he would go on about all his inventions. I mean, here's this guy. He invented, what we're using today. And they just thought, okay, this guy's a nut. I mean, he couldn't invent all these things, and yet he was creating inventions that we're using today. So his whole thing was that these towers would be broadcasting this power. And you still need a power station, and it's, with rotating magnetic fields. The first one was at Niagara Falls, by the way. And it's just a matter of and you have, every car has an alternator in it that's, making electricity by doing this. And then these anti-gravity ships are hovering around. They're drawing power from his towers. They have these big searchlights and stuff on them. Now, curiously, you have this whole thing of a group called the Lemurian Fellowship that started in Chicago and Milwaukee. Later they moved to Los Angeles and then to San Diego. Their whole thing was that in Atlantis, they claimed, there were these crystal towers, like Tesla's towers, but they were giant monolithic crystal towers, and they were tuned and everything, and they were broadcasting power in Atlantis. This is what they claimed. Well, it's interesting because around the world, and supposedly at Tiwanaku and Puma Punku, there was one too, is you have obelisks, and obelisks are monolithic crystal towers. They're one solid piece of stone. They're made out of granite, which is embedded with tiny quartz crystals, and they're cut and articulated. They can be tuned like a tuning fork. And today we have obelisks in Egypt, and there are obelisks in Ethiopia too, by the way. And Egyptologists don't have an explanation for obelisks. Obelisks are, they say, oh, it's a ray of the sun. But an obelisk is, again, we're talking 100-ton or 200-ton, granite monolith, and just erecting one, quarrying it, erecting it, moving it. I mean, and why? For no real reason. I mean, that's what Egyptologists say. Oh, they just liked them. That's what they say. For years, I've been trying to figure out. I'm like, why are they doing this? This is the one in Ethiopia, and they get recarved. I mean, they stand up. Actually, just standing an obelisk up is hard. There's a NOVA program. It's like the one TV show that goes on about obelisks, and they can't do it. They try to just erect a little obelisk. They can't even. In show, they don't really do it. Eventually, they do manage to get one up, but it's hard for them. This is the unfinished obelisk, which is at the quarry in Aswan, Lower Egypt, and it's gigantically huge. They abandoned it because it was going to be imperfect. They found after they began quarrying it that the natural rock had a crack in it, and as soon as they discovered that, they just stopped all the quarry work because they couldn't use this obelisk. It had to be perfect to use it. All right, now, a guy back in the 70s too, when all the Bermuda Triangle stuff was so popular, there was a flurry of all these books about, this triangle and that triangle. So they wrote one, there was a couple of books about the Great Lakes Triangle. Well, this Canadian guy, what he was talking about in this book, in one chapter, I thought it was so interesting, was he was saying that it's in Ontario, and there's this park there called Ile Presqu'île Park, right over here. Ile Presqu'île National Park, okay? And it's there today, and according to him, in that book, he said in the early 1800s, people would row out from the shore, a small distance, but out there, and they said there was the tip of an obelisk was in the lake, and the people would row up on a Sunday and moor their yachts or their little rowboats to this tip of this obelisk that was just coming out of the lake, and have a picnic and stuff, and then go back. And this was a famous story. But then there was a huge storm, which was also predicted by this Indian chief, who kind of cursed the locals and said, okay, we've had it with you. And he cursed them. And then there was this giant, big storm on Lake Ontario. And after that, this obelisk wasn't there anymore. That's the story. So the idea that obelisks were all over the world, even in South America and stuff, I mean, there is that also at Karnak and stuff like that. Well, get this. There's a thing on the moon called the Blair Cuspids, and this is what it looks like. It's obelisks on the moon, apparently. The Russians really got into this. They're called the Blair Cuspids, and there's this arrangement on the moon. This is what the Russians say that it looks like. It's named after a British astronomer. His name is Blair. So the Russians are saying that, yeah, there's this area of the moon. It is basically got these obelisks, just like on the Earth, and yeah, what that's all about, and who put them there, I don't know. And you know what? I think that's pretty much. Oh yeah, the last couple of slides on Mars, and this is on Phobos. There's also this thing right here. It's also supposedly, and you see it's by the shadows. They take these things are really long and tall, but this is also supposed to be like an obelisk on Phobos, which is one of the moons of Mars. And I did a whole book on extraterrestrialology. I've done this, I'm not going to go into all that today, all the pyramids and all the other stuff on the moon and Mars. It's fascinating, and of course I am interested in that. And that basically concludes my presentation. Thanks very much. So I know I'm running out of time. We have to stop at 5, right? So I probably have time for a few questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I'll be here. Some questions? Yes, ma'am.
You recently read material from a man named James Allen, who's claimed to have found Atlantis in the Altiplano.
Right, and I know him. Yeah, sure.
Awesome. I was just wondering what your opinion was of him and his work.
Yeah, and he contacted me years ago. It's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, he's on to something. Yeah, that's Atlantis. I don't think so, but he certainly found, megalithic stuff. And what happened there, and I do talk about it, and I talk about him in my new book. Okay, yeah, he's saying that, and I think he's right, at one point there was a massive earthquake in South America, and Lake Titicaca itself became the tidal wave. and it washed out, or wiped out Puma Punku and Tiwanaku, and went down and wiped out all this other stuff. Yeah. The problem with his thing, and I like his books and his work, it's great, is that people, when they want to find Atlantis, you know, well, the story of Atlantis is, you know, it's so many thousands of years old, and it's an island, and it was destroyed. So archaeologists think, well, I'll go out, I'll find an island, and I'll find a cataclysm. Well, boy, you don't have to go very far to find that. And in fact, they just go to the next island from, you know, 2 islands from Athens, and there's Santorini, Thera, and it's like, yeah, here's a cataclysm, you know, and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I mean, it's like, so Atlantis has been found all over the world. Simply because, you know, they're looking for a cataclysm, and they're looking for megaliths, and so they find it.
Actually, Alan put up a list of 50 points from Plato's description and compared his site to Santorini.
Oh yeah,
And
right.
this site gets 49 out of 50, and Santorini barely makes 30.
Right. Actually, I didn't get into this, and I can show other things. I do a whole thing on Atlantis and stuff like that. They're finding now underwater ruins around Cuba and the Yucatan and stuff like that, and you know, Bimini Road. So in the Caribbean, and particularly around Cuba, yeah, I mean, this is a good site for Atlantis. And those are structures underwater, okay, which is where Atlantis is supposed to be, underwater, not 13,000 feet in the Andes. I mean, that's the thing. That's all. But I mean, he's on the right track. Okay, yeah, and his book is great. We sell it. Yes, sir.
Yes, on the bowl in Bolivia that has the cuneiform writing, is that writing relieved or is it carved into it?
It's carved into it, that bowl, and that bowl's ceramic. Yeah, I mean, that's not stone. The Titicaca monolith is granite, and it has Sumerian writing on it too. But yeah, the Fuente Magna bowl is a ceramic bowl. So yeah, somebody with just a wooden pen before it was fired, yeah, wrote the cuneiform. And the cuneiform they have translated is a kind of it's a thing for the gods, and the gods are blessing some, you know, ceremony or something, and everything's good, you know. Yes.
What's your opinion about the Egyptian and Grand Canyon connection?
Yeah, and that has to do with the cam and that whole thing with the Grand Canyon. I don't have time to talk about it today, but yeah, there's a real connection there of Egyptian and kind of Hindu, Buddhist, Tibetan stuff. And that's the interesting thing where these cam come in, because they are these guys who are sort of Egyptians, but they're also like Tibetan, you know, Buddhist, Hindus. Okay. And they, like the Olmecs, a lot of them look like they're from Africa, you know, but they also have this Oriental look kind of thing. So and apparently that's what they found in the Grand Canyon, was something that's part Egyptian, but also has this Eastern influence too, Buddhist, Hindu kind of stuff.
I got it.
Yeah.
My question is, what is your theory as to the reason that they removed those skulls from the museums? Apparently it happened in 2 places.
Which stones, which
The
museum?
skulls.
Okay, in Tiwanaku, like those, right,
I'm
okay.
curious to why they were removed, and you mentioned 2 separate museums in 2 different places.
That's right, Comacalco in Mexico and the museum in Tiwanaku, right. At Comacalco, they weren't so much removing the skulls because they don't have that
Covering
many.
them up, but they didn't want to...
Yeah, they were more removing those displays and some of the statues. Yeah, and at Tiwanaku, they did remove the entire display of the skulls.
But why?
I think, and I can only guess. They saying like, oh well, we need to restore this area or do something, whatever. What I'm thinking is that what happens is the mainstream archaeologists, and they're coming from universities, a lot of it in the United States, and universities are constantly gifting money to these countries, and Bolivia is totally like this. I mean, they can't afford really to do their own excavations. So they're glad when University of California or Pennsylvania or whoever comes and does a dig, and that's money in their pocket, and people will be hired. And the country itself can give them conditions, like, well, if you're going to do excavations here, it's going to cost you so much. We want to have our guy on site, watch everything you do, whatever. But at the same time, those mainstream professors are influential, and they can maybe go to the Tiwanaku guys, and I think the Ancient Aliens show has actually influenced them too, because what's kind of going on, and I saw this at Tiwanaku just the last time, there's all these guys from Chile, because that show is shown in Latin America and it's in Spanish. And so people are suddenly taking a bigger interest in this. And let me tell you, I mean, there's certain things, particularly the way these people look, and those skulls, and the way these, you know, I mean, when you look at those guys, you're thinking like, whoa, you know, who are these guys? You know, they look like they're extraterrestrials. They do. And now that's not cool. Major museums. When I was with Ancient Aliens a couple of years ago, they tried to get permission to film at certain sites in Mexico, like at Teotihuacan. And the Archaeological Authority in Mexico wouldn't let them film, simply because they were, you know, it was an Ancient Alien show. And they wouldn't give them permission. I mean, they didn't want their pyramids in some show like that. So you've got that, and I think that's why they removed that. They don't want people looking at the stuff and going like, whoa, who are those guys? And so if you can go to Tiwanaku and just see the ruins without seeing some weird cone head, yeah, you'll have a different idea. But when they're showing you cone heads, yeah, then you're going like, those guys built this? We're out of time. All right, thanks very much, everybody.